Hey everybody, this week we're going to have a look back at some very interesting old IPs that I think would do much better now, like with the graphics engines we have now, and obviously just people's tastes now. I'm your host, welcome to LOD Xtra. Welcome guys, it's me, Tirus. Welcome to the LOD Xtra. This week we're going to look at a couple of IPs that I think would do much better now than they did then, with a more modern touch to them. Like when I mean modern, I don't just mean like someone's viewpoint changing over time. I mean like the graphics engines we have now, the capabilities of some teams that there are now. I think they'd be far more successful now than then. Now, the first one I'm going to touch on, the first two I'm going to touch on were actually PlayStation 3 launch titles, and I would argue carried the system for the first few years, with their sequels. And sadly, the studio for the first one we're going to talk about is no longer with us. They are Codemasters something now. So we'll start with MotorsTorm. Now, when the PlayStation 3 was first being advertised and stuff like that, like some of the earliest stuff I saw was how the physics and stuff would work, how the track would differ per vehicle. If you drove up a muddy trail with a mud plugger, for example, as opposed to a scrambler or an off-road bike, as some people might want to call it. The off-road bike on a perfect conditions would completely and utterly blitz the mudlugger, but the way the tracks were, certain vehicles were faster over certain terrains, and that made it viable for, say, someone to win the race driving a full-on lorry. You know what I mean? The first game was primarily in the desert. So there's a lot of muddy tracks, a lot of cliffs, a lot of hill, sandy, dirt, pretty rock solid terrain and stuff like that. And the multiplayer was cracker. Now, being a game of its time, there wasn't a whole lot to it to go on and on and on about. It was just really solid gameplay, really fun physics. The destruction, like it had like, I wouldn't say burnout level destruction, but it had pretty good destruction. Your wheels would fly off, your chassis would bend, the car would roll and burst into flames. It was really, really good, and I argue it's probably one of the best racing game launch titles I've had ever, really. Like I had a PS2 at launch, didn't like any of the racing games. PS4 Drive Club, even though it was the same studio, I didn't like it. I like a certain kind of racer, which sort of these days has evolved into like, I love Forza Horizon. I love the open world map and the way it's set up. I'm not a big track racer guy, so Forza Motorsport, as much as I like it, I just can't play it very long. It's the same with Gran Turismo 7. I recently rented Gran Turismo 7. I haven't played Gran Turismo since 6 on the PS3, so I wanted to see how much it has changed, improved, yada yada yada. And I'm already like maybe only 2 or 3 hours into it, and I'm having to force myself to play it. It's just not grabbing my attention. As graphically impressive as it is, I'm just gonna say it's fucking boring. So, sorry. Whereas MotorStorm, even to this day, I could play that for hours. It's just the kind of racing game I prefer. Its sequels, Pacific Rift. Pacific Rift was phenomenal. I'm really trying not to swear a lot. It was phenomenal. different. There were still some tracks that were, you know, rocky and muddy and dirty and stuff, but it was more like jungles. There was other elements added to it as well. If you drove over water, your boost would cool down, because if you overheated in your boost, you would blow up. There was also tracks that had fires or lava and stuff. If you were too close to the lava, your little boost indicator would be on fire. So when you used it, it filled up quicker, or it overheated much quicker. When you drove through streams or water, even if you were still boosting, your meter would drop, and you could boost longer and stuff like that. The multiplayer in 2 was quite good. It was quite good. When Pacific Rift came out, I lived on my own in a block of flats, and the internet in those flats was abysmal. So me and multiplayer games back then had a love-hate relationship. Some would work pretty well, like it turns out ones that had like dedicated servers, but see, the games that was more peer-to-peer, and like the PlayStation sending and receiving the information as, you know, as like the host or something, just really didn't get along well. You could be in second place, you could take a corner, and you'll be rubber banded back to sixth. You know, it was really hard to play stuff like that back then for me. But one of the few games that really played well will be the one we talk about next. Motorstorm Apocalypse could have been an absolutely mind-blowing game, but when it came out, or when it was set to come out initially, was when the big tsunami hit Japan, and I think they delayed it, feeling that it'd be inappropriate to bring a game out that had tsunami in it, and really bad weather and stuff like that. Part of Apocalypse's gimmick, to be different than the previous ones, was that the island they were racing on had recently been absolutely ripped to pieces by storms, tsunami, you know, earthquakes, stuff like that. So, in my opinion, it was just incredibly horrible bad luck for Evolution Studios that happened, and then obviously the game had to be delayed. And eventually, when it came out, there was next to no fanfare. I didn't see a launch trailer or anything like that. I'm not saying there wasn't one. Like I'm almost positive there was, but did I see it being pushed around? I mean, back then, most of the wrestling on Sky One, before it'd be like, oh, sponsored by whatever the big game was at the time, and it would always like pretty consistently change. And nope, wasn't there. Didn't see advertised on YouTube very much. Social media back then, barely seen anything pushed about it. Social feeds for PlayStation and all, nothing, not really mentioned it too much. There was no effort to remind people that this game was here, this game was out, that it had come, blah blah blah, and in my opinion it just fell flat on its face. Now, is that why for the PlayStation 4 they did Drive Club, you know, do something different? Still a racing game, but something different, a very social experience. I would say Drive Clubs was the inspiration behind some of the features you see in racers now, like the social aspects of all of them, the competitive aspects of a lot of them, you know, the stats and stuff. I would say Drive Clubs really, you know, what brought those to those developers' attention. Motorstorm today on PlayStation 5 or PC, whatever they decide to do with the IP, with modern graphics technology, even if they just use Unreal Engine 5 instead of a proprietary one that Sony owns, it would be mind-blowing. Done well, it would be mind-blowing. The graphics would be incredible, the destruction would be unbelievable. The social features, I mean, Sony has tried to make PlayStation 5 a very social system. The features and stuff on it are always being tweaked and changed. If something doesn't work, they actually roll it back. Like the party stuff when the PlayStation 5 it was a year ago, it might even be longer than that. It was horrible. It was like 5 or 6 things you had to go to just to set up a party, and obviously they rolled that back, and now it's much easier to create a party and to get into one and stuff. I reckon motorstorm would do really, really well. Now, say Unreal Engine 5, tropical setting, again, like Pacific Rift, just sort of leave the apocalypse thing at the side, because I don't think many people remember it. Also, now that I remember, back when Pacific Rift came out, and say, I think it was Modern Warfare 3, Black Ops 2 or something like that, there was a good big push for 3D gaming. If you remember 3D TVs, I had one, and playing Pacific Rift in 3D wasn't mentally mind-blowing, but it was a very different experience, and it was a welcome one. So, moving on to the next game franchise that we're going to talk about. I might actually do another episode with some more obscure IPs that they had. I mean, a lot of people always ask for a sequel to Heavenly Sword, but I think the most recent response they got to that was that it just didn't make the studio any money. So getting investors to invest in something that did not make money, I think that's a big ask. So I don't know if we'll ever see a Heavenly Sword 2. It was a beast of a game. I enjoyed it, but it's the age-old business argument now. If there's no the backing, then it's not happening. So this franchise we're going to talk about now is my personal favourite of all time. If there's ever a poll or a question there or anything like that, or anybody even just asks me what your favourite franchise, what your flat out favourite franchise is, I'd say Resistance. It caught me completely and utterly off guard when I seen the first few trailers from E3 at the time. Fair enough, the first one was pretty early, and the game ended up being nothing like that. But even from the whole potential of, what it was saying, like darker tone, sci-fi, sort of horror shooter, that was right up my street, because there isn't anything else like that. I mean, even Halo has, the sci-fi shooter down to a T, and even back then, Halo 1, 2, unbelievable. But even Halo's, horror parts, like when it concerns the flood and stuff like that, they're fleeting. Whereas Resistance it is a horror from the start. You're on the back foot. Yes, humanity is with the Covenant as well, but this is like an alternate history. Russia completely wiped out before anyone even really knows what's going on because of the Iron Curtain. You play as an American, Nathan Hale, who has flown into Dover along with a lot of other US troops, bringing supplies to trade for. I'm not really going to spoil it in case anybody wants to go back and play it, but basically trade with what's left of the British military for something that the Americans don't have in regards to the Chimera, and the Chimera wiped them out, and Nathan Hale's the only one that survives, and then obviously you control him throughout the entirety of the game. Now, even today, you could play 1, 2, and 3 if you still had a PS3. They were playable for, well, I think 3 was playable on PlayStation Now for the longest time. I'll just check right this moment to see if you can still play Resistance 3 on the new PlayStation Plus, because I haven't actually checked, and I went, yep, you can still play Resistance 3 if you have a premium PlayStation 3 subscription, but not 1 and 2. The multiplayer for all 3 of these games is off. Like, there's no server, so like, there's no reason not to have them there. I mean, Sony owns them. Resistance 1 was a fantastic launch title. For me, it was gratification for waiting. I still had a PlayStation 2. A lot of my friends had went, oh, the 360 looks really, really good. They were being very impressed with the Xbox 360. So they upgraded from a PlayStation 2 to a 360. Whereas I waited the extra year and paid the extra money because, let's face it, as much as I love the PlayStation 3, it was not worth what everybody paid for it at launch. Absolutely not. I paid like £600 for the bundle I got. Was not worth it. I mean, Warhawk and Oblivion, I didn't get them straight away. I had to wait months for them. I kept getting emails from the catalog I bought it from. Oh, they will be posted when they become available, blah blah blah. And I'm like, all right, I've got the PlayStation 3, I've got Resistance, and I've got Motorstorm. I'm happy enough. That's me sorted. The multiplayer for 1 was good. It was simple. I don't know if simple's the right term though. I'm not trying to belittle it. I mean, the game is way more than 10 years old now. I reckon more than 15 years old now. Resistance, Fall of Man. One side was human, one side was chimera. It was pretty good. It was simple. Team deathmatch. Everyone against each other. Like, what more explanation do you need for team deathmatch? It just works, and it was one of the few games at the time that worked with my internet. Resistance 2, now that was when the series solidified as my absolute favorite. They took a severe step up. The campaign was insane. The story was fantastic. The ending was really interesting. I thought, wow. Whoa, okay, here we go. There was two multiplayers. There was a PvP multiplayer, and there was a co-op multiplayer, and the co-op multiplayer was absolutely fantastic. Getting great tech. You had different classes, upgrading your weapons. I always played a class where I had a minigun which had a shield, so everyone could stand behind me as I'm spraying and they could shoot through the shield at the chimera, and my shield was obviously taking a lot of the hits from what was being fired at us. And it was like a co-op, get to different objectives kind of gameplay, and it just, like, it wasn't too complicated. It could get really hairy sometimes. Like, some of the enemies that would, in the volume you would get them, was pretty good. Augurs were an absolute nightmare, because if the AI got you, sorry, if the computer got you and they were spraying through the walls, if you ever played Resistance, you'll know the auger can travel through solid objects, and the further it has to travel to get to you, the more damage it does. And there was times I would, well, fair, yeah, I would say so. It happened quite a bit actually. There was times I would go around into a certain alleyway, and it used to be brutal, just very narrow, straight, all the chimeras down there shooting up towards us. If you didn't have a lot of health, you were going down, and you would just get shredded by auger blasts. Like, I don't know if that was a bug or if it was intentional, but you always ran down there and immediately brought out your shield. If you had the class that had the minigun with the shield on it, you always whapped that straight out. Yeah. The multiplayer, the PvP, it was good. It was fun. Everybody used noob tubes. The noob tubes from the carbine. It was just, as soon as you got ammo for the noob tubes, everyone just waited until there was a grip, and boom. Absolutely blown away. Now, where the campaign is concerned, the tone of the story shifted from the first game. I mean, it was no longer about fighting an unknown enemy, but the fact that now the enemy had crossed the ocean and was now in America as well. And some of the creatures different from the first one. Like there was one in particular, I think it's not a stalker, because there's like mech things that are called stalkers in the first one. Basically, this chimera can go invisible. I think it's a hunter, I'm not sure. And it has massive claws. So it can't use the guns like the other chimeras or the hybrids, but when you get too close to it, it'll just launch itself at you, and that's when it becomes visible. And in one of the cutscenes when you first see it, it launches at one of the soldiers and it just tears them in two. And then that's used, the whole convoy's up in smoke, everyone's getting attacked left, right, and center because they don't know what's going on. Like it happens that quick. There's also a giant chimera, which I can't remember the lore behind it. I don't know if there was more than one of them or if that was the only one, and you had to fight it, and the fight for that was cracker. That was also the first game my now wife ever actually bought for me. It was one of those, what do you want for Christmas? Don't need any, do you want a game? I sure, whatever. She remembered how much I played Fall of Man and bought me Resistance 2, and it was painful waiting to play it, but the wait was worth it. That was a fantastic game. Now, Resistance 3 was graphically impressive, but everything had a really dirty, kind of blurry filter on it. I don't know what it was. I think it would have looked a lot better if it didn't have that, but obviously hindsight's a wonderful thing. The multiplayer, I don't know if this is what the devs were going for, but it felt like a Call of Duty clone. It was much faster. The movements looked really weird sometimes. I mean, and early on, I don't know if this get patched and fixed later on. Early on, I remember being put off a little bit of the multiplayer because the character movements were so uncanny valley, like from the head to the waist, not moving at all, and the legs are going like side to side, up and back, like the waist's like properly turning round completely and stuff, but the upper body was staying where you were looking, and I couldn't concentrate on playing it and having fun and not look at that, and it would ruin the immersion. Not that games back then. Listen to me, games back then. Like when I talk to my son, who as of recording it's his 14th birthday today, when I talk to him about games from like the PlayStation 3 and stuff like that, he's like, I retro him. What? You mean PlayStation 3's retro? But it's like 2 generations ago. It's like nearly 20 years ago the PlayStation 3 was about. And yeah, that does make you feel quite old when you think about it. Yeah, it does make you feel quite old when you think about it. So, PlayStation, unfortunately, for the Resistance franchise, wasn't really as easily accessible knowledge as it is now. Like you hear all the time now about sales and about like how much they've sold and how well they've done, how much money they've made and stuff like that. But back then that wasn't really as readily available to people. I mean, people don't use the internet half as much then as they do now. And I was unaware of this, that 3 sold less than 2. Like, instead of, it getting popular and the sales going up with every iteration of the game, more was being invested into making the game, but less people was buying it. So, between, I think it was between 1 and 2, there was a PSP game, which is, it's very good. I owned it as well. And then I think between 2 and 3, there was a PlayStation Vita game, or was it after 3? But the Vita and the PSP game are 2 different protagonists. They are obviously set in the Resistance world and the timeline, but you're not playing the main character. You're not playing Nathan Hale, or in the third one, Joseph Capelli. In the first one, the PSP one, you're just angry English boy, just an angry English boy. And in the PS Vita one, Burning Skies, I adored it. I had only got my PlayStation Vita. I had literally only got it for this Resistance game. You're a firefighter in America. No, actually, you know what? I think the Vita one might actually be set before too, because in Burning Skies, the Chimera have only just crossed the water and are, attacking New York, and you're a firefighter who hasn't a clue what's going on. So most of the way through the game, you're fighting away, bullseye, carbine, stuff like that, but you have a fire axe, and that one difference like made a lot of things like can't get through a door, it's breakable, fire axe. There was things that were changed and added to it that made it different enough from the other ones that it worked. That I thought this is great. Hell, I even platinumed it. I don't know if you can check anymore, like on the PlayStations. I know you could on the PlayStation 4, but I platinumed it. It was my first platinum for Vita, and I'm sad to say the series hasn't existed since. There's three main games. Like three main games. A PSP one and a PlayStation Vita one. So there's 5 games total. And there was 2 books. There was 2 novelizations, but the novelizations weren't of the game. Like, it's not like the Assassin's Creed books where if you've played Assassin's Creed 2 and you get the book, it's basically a novel version of the game. No, these 2 books were set between events. It's like they filled in the lore and the story and what happened between the first game and the second game and the second game and the third game, and there was much more effort and lore building and story. There was so much more that could be told in the Resistance world, and sadly, one of the main reasons, sorry, maybe 2 reasons I feel that we'll never ever get more Resistance is there's just no demand for it. Like, all the Resistance fans they're all older. Like, if they done like a remake or they re-released Resistance 1, 2 and 3, even just touched it up and had servers again and stuff like that, I think it would attract some attention. It would ship some copies. Obviously it would make some money, but without something like that happening, I think Resistance has very little chance of ever coming back. Like, some of the gameplay has been shown here, some of the trailers and stuff like that. Like, they weren't high resolution trailers because the trailers are really old at this point. Something like this in a modern graphics engine, just exactly like what I said with Motorstorm. Something like this, an Unreal Engine 5. Oh my god, that would be unbelievable. Like, remakes, when they're done right, are fantastic. I'm currently playing Resident Evil 4 remake. My favorite game of last year was the Dead Space remake, and I know I've been on podcasts before and I have went, oh, I'm not overly sure. I think some devs are just being lazy and they're just going for the easy money maker. But some remakes are fantastic, hands down. That you could argue that they are based on these old games, but they're not these old games anymore. I mean, Dead Space changed enough for me that it scared the shit out of me a few times. Like, there was stuff in it that wasn't in the original that I was not expecting, and it got me a few times, which for me was fantastic, and I loved it. The audio design and visual design was just incredible. Now, that sort of treatment for the Resistance franchise, even if they just remade one of them and then that was it, that would be insane. But the developer for Resistance was Insomniac. Insomniac are a really, really talented studio. They're pretty big, But these guys, these are the Ratchet and Clank guys, these are the Spider-Man guys. You'll never, in my opinion, you'll never get them making anything other than those things. Obviously, Wolverine as well, but I think they're past the days of first-person shooters. Like, first-person shooters, I think, in general, just don't do as well as they used to. Like, yeah, you have your Call of Duty sell millions and millions of copies every year, but I just think, in general, that people's attitudes toward first-person shooters has kind of went a bit stale. We've just had too many come out that are just, they're just not it. Like, they just feel rushed, and like they feel like they're implying that the consumer's stupid. I mean, look at Battlefield 2042. I'm not going to start a big rant because we'll be here for an hour, but 2042 was an absolute insult to consumers and long-time fans. And I feel that that sort of behaviour has went on many, many times. And even myself, when I see a new first-person shooter is announced, half the time I don't even look, you know, because of these experiences. Right, let me know in the comments below if you guys feel the same, or if there's any PlayStation 3 or 2 era IPs that you think PlayStation could dive into and bring into the modern scene, because like all we're getting now is remakes and sequels. And if that trend's going to continue, they're going to run out of stuff to remake. They're going to have to start looking further back. Hopefully that happens. Some of the remakes are good. In one of the recent State of Plays, they showed the Silent Hill 2 remake, and I'm sorry, I think I've just been spoiled by the Resident Evil remakes. The Resident Evil remakes set a heck of a bar, and this Silent Hill 2 remake's just not it. And I don't think that's just because of the Resident Evil remakes. I mean, even that Metal Gear 3 remake, the trailer we've seen, if that's gameplay, then it's maybe even a bit above the effort that the Resident Evil remakes make. And if that's the kind of stuff that they're going to come off with for a remake of something as classic as Silent Hill 2, I hope it doesn't do well. Like, I hope that when something pushes the bar and sets a new high, that it's celebrated. Like, I don't want to hear any of this gurney crap. Like, when Baldur's Gate 3 came out, oh, there was developers, oh, it's an unrealistic expectation, oh, it's an anomaly in the market, blah, blah, blah. Pull your fingers out of your arse and make good games. Make impressive games. Your games will sell. They'll be easier to market when they're actually fucking good. There's too many games coming out now, and it's just, this will be a good example. The Dark Crystal movies, and I think it was a show as well, a movie and a show, which a lot of people I know watched them when they were kids. Yes, I'm that old, and loved it. When they got this game, Dark Crystal Age of Resistance Tactics, they hated it. They went, what is the point in this? This is just slapping the name of something that was good onto something else, and oh no, this isn't good. Now, that's not me saying that game's not good, because I'm not stupid enough to go, I'll buy that. I would look at it first, you know. So, yeah. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time out of your day to listen to my podcast or to watch my ugly mug. I have been Tirus. This has been the LOD Extra, and have a wonderful day.